Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Monday, July 21st edition of Intelligence Report with shrinkformen.com and avoiceformen.com. I, as usual, am Dean Esmay, Managing Editor and Operations Manager at A Voice for Men. Joining me is the evil overlord and oppressor of all things female, Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. Say hi, Tara.
Hi, everyone.
And Paul Elam, the cute, cuddly, furry, lovable teddy bear that we all love. Hi, Paul.
What up? What up?
Okay, so we have some fun stories up this week. We had a sort of
who you are.
Yeah, huh?
Depending on who you are.
Well, depending on, they're not all fun. So maybe we won't start with the fun one. Maybe we'll end with the fun one so we don't get too annoyed. In my neck of the woods, we have a rather, I don't know, people are laughing at this. I don't find it all that funny, but I have to admit there are jokes that are coming. Here in my part of the world, Michigan, a woman shot her boyfriend, and the reason she gave for shooting him is he did not ejaculate enough while they were having sex. Now that's pretty gross. And the jokes kind of write themselves about firing blanks and all that, but what I found further interesting looking at this story is that this is the second time she's shot a man. And so she shot her husband a couple decades ago, and today she's upfront about why she shot her current boyfriend. She says she stated apparently that she knew he was having an affair because he wasn't producing enough ejaculate. Now, what is this man? And it's in the news story says this man was hospitalized for 6 weeks after the shooting and is still recovering. So, in fact, this man may have lifelong crippling injuries. Actually, if you're still recovering 6 weeks after, there's a real good chance a lot of that kind of injury may produce lifelong results. We're pretty sure that's part of what led to Andy Warhol's eventual death. What do you say about something like this? And who wants to take the bet that she's out on bail?
No, I don't want to bet.
I'm sorry, I've got it wrong. I'm looking at it now, but she was in fact convicted, which is nice. But she is out on appeal. She is out on appeal. So she is still walking the streets. The second time she has shot somebody.
Do you know why who her first victim was, and what did he not?
The story.
Was there not enough saliva in his mouth of the first victim? Like, what was the issue with the first person?
Stories actually clearly state that there are no details on what her rationale was for shooting a man before, but the reports do. CBS Detroit, for example, reports while she's out on appeal on a $10,000 bond. Which, by the way, she hasn't posted. $10,000 cash for what is clearly attempted murder. We have a phrase for this. I've never particularly liked it, but what other phrase would you use? Pussy pass. If this was a man who shot his woman in the stomach, I don't think he'd be out on $10,000 bail. Do you?
No.
No.
No. No,
especially if he had shot someone previously.
Especially if he had shot somebody previously. That's right. This man was nearly killed. The story on CBS mentions wounds to his colon and his pancreas. Both of those are particularly serious, but the pancreas, I mean, you lose your pancreas, you lose your life quite frequently. And, of course, a punctured colon can lead to systemic infection. This guy could be recovering for a long time. I don't know what to say, except here it is, another case of women being violent, and yet we still live in a society that obsesses over violence against women.
And
And
with a colon injury, he could end up with a stoma and defecating in a bag for the rest of his life. I mean, and that's really best case scenario when you get a gut shot. Internal injuries like that, they tend to plague you till you die, like they did with Andy Warhol. It will affect someday become a murder, which they probably will not prosecute for if he lives long enough. If he lives more than a couple of years and dies of complications from this, I doubt that the DA will raise any questions about it.
no, I don't call it right.
The moral of the story is as I hate to say it, is such an obvious punchline, but guys, shoot or be shot.
I guess.
Well, no, he did ejaculate. Her issue is that there wasn't enough ejaculate. Therefore, she assumed he was cheating, which, of course, is legitimate grounds to shoot someone in the stomach.
Oh, wait a minute.
It's legitimate grounds for a woman to shoot a man if she believes he's been unfaithful, not the other way around. That would be intimate partner violence.
Let's slow down for the slower people, and to note that the
Are feminists watching today?
probably
Okay.
shoot or be shot is a pun on ejaculating, not kill her before she kills you. Just in case the slow people needed some clarification on that.
Slow child splaining.
The
It's a
problem
thing.
is that the slow people are also the lying scumbags who will disregard the clarification and go ahead and quote mine anyway. So,
Yeah.
once again, men, shoot or be shot.
Yeah, exactly like the people who claim Warren Farrell glorifies incest, using an out-of-context 40-year-old quote. Scumbags that they are, they'll just do that shit. What this makes me think, though, I will often have people try to rationalize me, and it's not always just feminists, but it is frequently feminists. They will use FBI crime statistics reporting to show that men are a lot more, women are more vulnerable to violence than men are. They're victims more often. Men are more often the perpetrators. But what they never want to talk about is, and it's something even we don't talk about quite enough, there is a sentencing disparity we already know. Women are at a considerable advantage.
60%.
Right, but that's just on the sentencing they get if they're convicted in the first place.
Right.
In point of fact, and I've talked to criminologists and others about this, when a woman commits a crime, she's less like a violent crime, she's less likely to be arrested in the first place. If she is arrested, she is less likely to be formally charged, and under nearly identical circumstances, if she is formally charged, she is likely to get a lesser charge than a man for the same offense. We, in fact, have no idea whether it's actually true that women are less violent than men in general. We've already established to any credible degree that in intimate partner violence, domestic violence, women are equally as aggressive as men. In some ways, they're more aggressive, but it all depends on what you're looking at and how. Still, some will say that when it comes to other crimes, men are more aggressive. I just don't think that we have enough study to believe that because of stories like this. This woman should be getting charged for attempted murder.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear. Just
she should have been denied bail given this was her second shooting.
Yes, $10,000.
And was still sitting in jail, not out on bail.
So this clear attempted murder, she was sentenced to 20 months to 10 years. Okay, that is not a murder charge. I'm sorry, it's not. So clearly, she got a pass just by getting a lesser charge in the first place. And now she's out on bond, on a very small bond, after her second shooting of somebody, because she was jealous.
Let me, if I can, post a comment real quick, just so that we can clarify it. Somebody has said it sounds made up stuff, like made up stuff you find on the Onion News, but the operative word there, folks, is but. This is not made up. This is very real. This woman, for the second time in her life, took a gun to a man, shot him, this time in the gut, which is an attempted murder, and she's walking around free. Um, uh, what can I say?
Yeah, even the conviction, even if it's overturned, I'm sorry, 20 months to 2 years to 10 years, she's probably out in 5 years tops. Yeah, especially because of her age, and especially because she's a woman. In fact, if she serves less than 2 years of it, I'd be surprised. And this is just the world we live in. Now, we do spend time kicking around feminists for things like this because they deserve it. But even the conservative mentality I grew up with automatically thinks of it was a woman as somehow having done something less offensive when she does this to a man. I grew up in an old school religious fundamentalist community that was anti-feminist, and I know most of the people I grew up with would have said, well, what did he do to deserve that? It must be something more than what she's saying. Although this is so blatant, I don't know what they'd say to this.
Well, they might say the same thing. We want to add into the information that we're passing around on sentencing disparities. One, as you said, women receive 66% less time for the same crime as men, all other things being equal. And two, women are half as likely to be incarcerated for the same crime to begin with. So men are roughly put in prison twice as often as women for the same crime. You can find that at the Department of Justice statistics.
And I'm going to point out again, we're only talking about disparities. We still have the reality that they're less likely to be arrested for the same crime in the first place. They're less likely to be prosecuted if they are arrested, and they're less likely to be convicted. They tend to get a lesser charge in the first place. So even there, again, I'm underlining the fact we don't even know that women are less violent. We know women tend to get away with being violent more than men do. That's what we know. Maybe men in the aggregate are more violent, but you can't say that with any certainty, and you certainly can't use FBI statistics to show that. You can't.
No, and we know from history going through black widow killers and their patterns over the years that many black widow killers are women that killed husbands for insurance money or inheritance and killed husband after husband after husband were not even, it often took a fluke to even establish them as a suspect because police automatically would not consider a woman a suspect in that crime. They would look for male culprits in order to try to arrest and prosecute simply because they could not imagine the idea that a woman would be doing this to their husband. So the statistics we have, which are horrendous enough, of 66% sentencing disparity is absolutely criminal. The fact that men go to prison twice as often for the same crimes is just as abhorrent to look at, but what Dean is saying is absolutely true. Those statistics do not account for women that are never brought to justice to begin with because police refuse to see them as suspects.
Precisely. And yeah, well, once we get rid of patriarchy, the ever elusive patriarchy, or the flying spaghetti monster, that'll just be fixed right up. No, this has been going on.
Once we get rid of patriarchy, then women who uphold their moral obligation to kill their abusive husbands, undocumented, unproven, while they're asleep or shoot them in the back, they'll be getting grants from the government, right?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm making a reference to a batshit insane Canadian attorney and law professor. What is her first name? Last name is Sheehy, I believe.
Elizabeth,
that's right.
The author of Defending Battered Women on Trial, which, by the way, AVFM's friend and John Hembling is currently doing a whole lot of research on up in Canada. That's where most of his time is being taken up these days. We wish him luck with that because that woman's a psycho and she's a law professor. But I mean, this has been going on for centuries. It really has been. I remember Robert St. Estephe. You hear this common thing: serial killers even are rarely female. and Robert just sat down to start doing history on, and he found over 800 instances of them through history, and that's one researcher working on his own. Yet still this myth pervades that murder and mayhem are a male phenomenon, and it's sexist garbage. I talked to one criminologist professor a few months ago, and he says openly that there is a system of in the universities of what he would call gender apartheid, where you are just not really allowed to look at these questions. You won't get the grants. You might not even ever get tenure if you're talking about them in the first place. This is like a closed subject area. It's amazing that anybody can get any real research on it at all. Rant, rave, rant, rave, rant, rave. Anybody want to say anything more about the Michigan woman who thinks that she can shoot her boyfriend because he doesn't produce enough semen for her? Okay. Moving on. I don't know who wanted to talk about this subject. We do see a case of somebody who's not getting a vagina pass, apparently. A Texas-based actress, so I guess this must be one of your friends, Paul, mailed some ricin to the President of the United States. And it looks like she's going to get 18 years for it, which is actually, well, I'm glad to see it, I think. Who has something more to say about this case? Because I didn't study it in depth.
I think this was Paul's story, but my take on it was this was a convoluted plot to have her ex-husband or her estranged husband murdered by the state through proxy violence.
I don't think you guys can hear me.
I hear you.
Now I can.
Okay. There was a period there where you couldn't. Yeah, I read this story. I wanted to go back for a moment first, though, and mention again that if you're under the illusion that most serial killers are men, please go read The Unknown History of Misandry on the website. And what you will find, whether you like it or not, is that the greatest majority of serial killers, those that kill multiple victims with intent and for profit or for joy or whatever, are in fact women. But let's go to this.
Uh-oh, are we losing Paul again? Yeah, it seems like we have.
There he is.
There I am.
Briefly, Paul.
I don't know what's going on here. Hey, you know what, guys? What might help is that if I actually hardwire my modem.
There you go.
You probably should have done that before the hangout.
Now
Paul.
you've got your thinking cap on.
I'm trying to figure out. It says this woman who mailed ricin to the president was in Walking Dead. I'm trying to figure out what part she played because I love the Walking Dead. Yeah.
Let's hope it was a zombie. Just briefly, the story is, and this is from Jezebel.com of all places, which I give them sort of qualified kudos for even running this story. But let's go ahead. A Texas-based actress who appeared on The Walking Dead, Franklin and Bash, and Vampire Diaries was sentenced to 18 years in prison for mailing letters laced with ricin to President Obama and Michael Bloomberg. She also attempted to frame her ex-husband for the crime. This is via USA Today. Shannon Guest Richardson, 36, was also ordered to pay $367,000 restitution as a part of a plea bargain for pleading guilty in December to one count of developing, producing, possessing, and transferring a biological agent for use as a weapon. She bought the materials, castor bean seeds, and lime online. Richardson mailed 3 letters in May 2013 from her home in New Boston near Texarkana, then drove to a Shreveport, Louisiana police station to implicate her estranged husband, who had filed for divorce. She told FBI she did not think the letters would be opened because of security reasons. What's in this letter is nothing compared to what we've got in store for you, Mr. President, read the letter to Obama. You will have to kill me and my family before you get my guns. Anyone wants to come to my house will get shot in the face. Richardson apologized at her sentencing, saying, and I quote, "I never intended for anybody to be hurt." She said, "I am not a bad person. I don't have it in me to hurt anyone. I do love my country and I respect my president so much that I mailed him poison and then tried to blame my ex-husband for it, who I also would not hurt for any reason, form, or fashion." I am just absolutely astounded. I would like first just to get a comment from Dr. T on this, because this is like the sort of I don't want to hurt. I mailed ricin to the president and tried to blame my ex-husband, but I don't have it in my heart to hurt anyone. Is this bitch serious? Does she believe this?
She probably does believe it. Yes. I never cease to be amazed by the number of women, and certainly some men, who convince themselves of their own bullshit. And if she has some type of characterological disorder, then, I don't know, that, the kind where your feelings become facts. Yeah, she probably does believe it now because she got caught.
I have seen a consistent pattern on this, though, that somehow is seeped in the culture, and it relates to a few other things. Recently, the very shallow and juvenile Sam Sater and Matt Binder made a big deal out of the fact that I had never supposedly heard of Stop and Frisk, when all I did was ask him for what source he was reading from. I knew about Stop and Frisk because this apparently is what we're supposed to be taking on as a men's rights issue. Well, in fact, it is a legitimate one, but I found it interesting that when he provided me with this source, nowhere in that source did it point out that men were almost all the victims. You had to dig really deep to find that, even to be revealed that virtually all the victims were male. But I remember getting into discussions with people about this and saying, I do think this is an issue, but I don't think it's as important an issue as false imprisonment and denying men rotting away in debtor's prison or rotting away on false allegations in prison. And somebody actually said to me, I think it's just as bad. And I'm like, okay, I've been stopped and frisked unlawfully at least once, if not twice myself. But raise your hand. Which do you want, 6 months in jail or to be frisked? I'll take being frisked, please. But apparently there's something in people's brain that thinks going to prison or going to jail, which isn't exactly the same thing, is at the same level as, like, that it's nothing, that it's no big deal to be sent to jail. And it goes into the same way. I've had people come to me even on the rape issue and say, you know, well, you're acting like a false allegation is worse than an actual rape. And I'm like, you could go to jail on a false allegation. Of course it could be worse. And they're like shocked and stunned and couldn't believe I would say something so horrendous when it's self-evidently true to me. Mm-hmm. That yes, going to prison for 10, 15 years is worse than being raped, especially because you may be murdered or killed or raped multiple times in prison, and that's just a start.
And have your reputation destroyed, loss of career, loss of all of your assets, loss of friends and family if they believe the lie.
And that's assuming you survive the prison experience.
No people rally around a rape victim. No one rallies around somebody accused of rape.
And I assure you they will put a probation officer on your case after you're released from prison to make you shut up about all of it.
Yeah, and then you're on the sex offenders registry for life. So, you know what? I agree with you. I'd rather not have either thing happen to me, but I'll take a 10-minute forced sexual encounter as opposed to 10 years in prison.
Yeah, me too.
Myself, and I'm betting you that if Chris Mackney had a choice of being frisked or go to prison, he'd probably still be alive today.
Yeah, no lie. Exactly. But I'm just pointing out how there seems to be something in people's brains that thinks going to prison, why, that's just not a big deal at all. Well, I'm sorry. I've known guys who spent time...
Well, then maybe we should start a campaign for feminists, walk a mile in his orange jumpsuit. And we can put them in jail for 30 days or prison and see how if it's worse than they imagined.
We'll call it scared smart.
Yeah, maybe. So really, something in this woman's brain may really have been thinking, I'm going to try to get my husband put in jail, and that doesn't mean I want to hurt him. I'm just, I don't know, what is it, a prank? I'm sorry, sending somebody ricin is attempted murder.
Not a prank. She could be angry that I don't know the particulars of their divorce, but usually when a woman's trying to get a man arrested, it's because vengeance for being emotionally hurt or feeling rejected, or she has financial incentive to do so. I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
No, I was being snarky with the word prank. I was being snarky, sorry. It's hard to tell sometimes when you're talking about these things because they're so surreal.
And let us not rule out the possibility she might have had a chance at getting her ex busted for this. Mm-hmm. That is not outside the realm of reason that she could shed a few tears at a police station and say, look, my husband's a horrible man. I think he's mailed ricin to the president, and the next thing you know, this guy's behind bars.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And you have no way of measuring the rate of such crimes either. You have no way of measuring it. Just like it's very hard to measure the rate of proxy violence, which is when a woman, a little known fact, if a woman hires a hitman to kill her husband and the hitman succeeds, that is not counted as a domestic violence homicide.
That's incredible.
But it isn't. It's not in the domestic violence stats at all. It's not considered an act.
So is it, if the converse is true, if a man hires a hitman to kill his wife, is that considered domestic violence?
I guess I've never looked at that question, but I would assume so. They're just considering it somebody else did the murder, therefore it's not an intimate partner murder. It's not even an intimate partner assault. So really, I knew a girl who in high school claimed she was raped, and 4 or 5 of her male buddies went and found the guy and beat the living shit out of him. To this day, this was 20, 30 years ago, to this day she admits she was really stoned and she's not 100% sure what happened. They were both stoned, but that's a case of pure proxy violence. Whether it was her intent or not, she had that boy beat the shit out of. And he was hospitalized. I mean, he lived, he's still walking around and all that. That's proxy violence, and it's a poorly understood phenomenon. I've even had at least one professor look at me and go, proxy violence, what an interesting concept. Like it had never occurred to them. This was a criminologist. He's like, well, tell me more about that.
Well, the last woman that was actually, I forget her name, it was, I think, 2 years ago, she was actually executed in Virginia. One of the rare cases where proxy violence was considered to be the crime that it deserved, and she was having sex with a man's son in order to get the son and his girlfriend to kill him. Okay,
and of course, who took the... and who took the fall? The only thing I'm going to tell you is that in the official crime stats, that will not be considered a domestic violence homicide. It'll be called something else. It'll be called a homicide, but it just won't be called domestic violence. Even though I would think any rational thinking person would think, yes, that's a domestic violence homicide. She wanted to have him killed, and she arranged to have him killed. Succeed or not, that's what it is. This is why you've got to really look at statistics before you accept them, folks. I guess that's all I can say there. I will give a moderate thumbs up to Jezebel, not only for running this story, but I've seen 2 or 3 other stories lately. Like, Jezebel has gone from from being truly just a completely irrational hate site to starting to address issues like this. Now, I think there's a reason they're starting to address things like this.
What would that reason be, Dean?
I think those dastardly men's rights activists who are supposedly harassing them and threatening them and frightening them and are doing everything wrong are pointing out things they can no longer ignore. And by the way, anybody watching, we don't do any of that shit. We argue with them, and they call that harassment. We criticize them, and they call that threatening. But in any case,
will continue to do until that despicable article on glorifying beating up your boyfriend is taken down and an apology is issued to the public for its very existence. Jezebel, you can put all the fucking Band-Aids you want on that piece of shit website of yours, making it look like you're starting to cover things from a little bit more fair angle. You should be embarrassed to have an article on your website that glorifies IPV. You should be ashamed of yourself for having written it in the first place, and you should take the son of a bitch down.
Or, yeah, take it down with an explanation, maybe an apology, or at least an explanation. I'll even accept, you know what, it was very shallow of us. I'll accept that. Because we do live in a milieu where nobody even thinks to question this sort of thing. Whatever, I'm nicer than Paul, though. So.
Well, they lived in a milieu in 1936 Berlin where people didn't question a lot of shit, too. I'm not buying it.
No. I've got no argument for you. Argument for that. Got anything more you want to say about Ricin girl, Tara? Dr. T?
I hope she does the time, although I'm counting down before her attorney issues a statement that her estranged husband was emotionally and physically abusive. Surprised that allegation hasn't been made yet, frankly.
Yes, Elizabeth Sheehy will be at follow-up hearings.
Thank God she's Canadian, so she probably can't be an expert witness in the U.S., but you never know. The reasoning she uses would pretty much hold up in American courts from what I've seen. Still, it does seem like the country tends to take it really serious when you go after the president. I know Squeaky Fromm, who tried to kill Gerald Ford, spent a real long time in the slammer. And she didn't even have the gun loaded. Oh, maybe it did, but it didn't go off.
It misfired.
Yeah, it misfired. That's right. But anyway, all right. At least they're covering it, so that's something. Now on to something more fun, and I'm sorry, but it is fun. The butthurt in feminism land is at such massive levels, it's off the scale. I think this started when the poor folks at Huffington Post made what was probably a mistake and commissioned a poll, from an omnibus poll from YouGov, to find out how well people identify with feminism. And what they found, to their horror, they kind of tried to spin it backwards, but only 23% of women and 16% of men self-identify as feminists, which is another way of saying 77% of women, an overwhelming, crushing majority of women, do not identify as feminists, and even slightly more men don't. Of course, some of those men, it's probably because they've been told that as men they're not allowed to be feminists, which many feminists will claim. They're not consistent on that. Some say, well, of course a man can be a feminist, but many other feminists will say, no, a man can't be a feminist. So even that might help explain that small disparity between men and women. But the fact is, the vast majority of Americans, male or female alike, do not identify as feminists. And a recent Tumblr campaign has caused, which may be related or not, has caused all kinds of notice in the press, which is a lot of women, intelligent women of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, obviously holding up signs saying, I don't need feminism because, and writing out their reasons. And it's been getting a lot of traction on Tumblr, and it's tracking high on Twitter now too. And it's really funny watching the incredibly defensive, condescending, and sometimes downright bigoted and sexist attempts to explain why the vast majority of women in the United States are idiots for saying they don't identify with feminists, because that's what they're doing. There was this incredibly condescending piece by Derek Clifton in Mick, who also did a really silly piece about the International Conference on Men's Issues, where he distorted some things people said. Mostly a fair piece. He did interview me, but it was incredibly condescending and shallow piece on the men's movement. Now he's got this incredibly condescending and shallow piece on women against feminism, explaining how if you only understood that if we get rid of patriarchy, then, which is what feminism is all about, and feminism is all about equality, and women's voices have been marginalized for hundreds of years, and all the same bullshit we've heard for 40 years. And it's not just Eric Clifton and Mick. I don't want to just pick on him, because HuffPo has got pieces up on this. If you just go into Google News right now or Yahoo News and type "women against feminism," you'll see piece after piece after piece after piece trying to explain fundamentally why these women who are against feminism are misinformed and uneducated and stupid. Rather than consider the other slight possibility that maybe these are intelligent women who've done their research and come to their own conclusions, and that it is actually possible for an intelligent, thoughtful man or woman to look at feminist ideology and say there's something wrong here.
Yep. I actually have a message for Derek Clifton.
Let's let her keep it up there and talk to her so people
can see it.
Derek Clifton countered that this movement is this I am what is it? What's the hashtag, Dean? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Women against feminism.
Women against feminism. Yes, that we've all been brainwashed by MRAs. So this is
higher, Tara?
So this is
higher. Now talk.
We can see it. We can see it. I'm not brainwashed.
Okay.
Asshole.
Yes. I don't need feminism because I am not brainwashed, asshole.
Yeah, there you go. Sexist asshole, I would add. Bigoted asshole, I would add.
I didn't have enough room on my sign.
And it's not just old Eric, because you can see it in Bustle. It's all over HuffPo. The butthurt at HuffPo is massive. Daily Life. Some are trying to call it a big misunderstanding. How about considering? They just don't understand.
I love it. No means no unless you're a woman rejecting being a feminist. In which case, they're going to do the equivalent of date rape. No, you really are a feminist. You just don't understand why you're saying no, you're not a feminist.
That's right. So we've got feminism is for everybody, whether they want it or not, apparently. They're still repeating the same lies about unequal pay for equal work, which has been debunked by anybody who's actually looked at it. They're claiming that the recent Hobby Lobby decision that employers shouldn't necessarily have to pay for women's birth control is proof we live in an oppressive patriarchy, without even acknowledging, of course, that men have no viable birth control issues at all, options at all. And no, by the way, kids, condoms are not reliable birth control. They're claiming that victims are being blamed for rape when anybody says you should just do things that aren't foolish. If you said to a man, don't do something foolish, we don't call that victim blaming. All the same old lies about catcalling, blah, 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 blah. Women are oppressed, women are oppressed, women are oppressed. Women have been marginalized. Let me tell you something. Women have always been powerful, guys. They've always had power, and they've always had a voice. And I mean always, in every culture throughout history, ever. And if you were taught different, you were mistaught and brainwashed. They've always had power. One of the more colorful characters I remember from the and I only bring this up because we were recently interviewed by Mother Jones magazine, a mainstay political publication named after Mary Harris Jones. She was one of the most effective political activists of the 19th century, and got a hell of a lot done. And when the women's suffrage question was put to her, she said it was stupid. That and her direct quote was, "You don't need the vote to raise hell and change the world." She didn't care about it because she already had the power she wanted. Elizabeth Cady Stanton managed to get the Constitution of the United States amended, for fuck's sake, before women had the vote. The whole notion that women never had power because there was this little 50-year sliver of time when more men had the vote than women means women never had a voice and never had any power. That's just lack of education on history. I would recommend anybody look at the presentation Senator Ann Cools gave on Blackstone and the common law at the International Conference on Men's Issues. This whole, well, you know what? I'm talking too much. Somebody else say something.
You are talking too much, damn it. No, actually, I want to agree with everything you had to say. One of the statistics that I want to point out from that survey that you did not mention, though, that I think is very important, is that 8% of respondents in that survey identified as being anti-feminist. 8%. Now, of course, we'd have to break that down. We know that there's going to be a certain amount of Phyllis Schlafly types that believe that we should not have feminism so that we can keep men in positions of being beasts of burden for society. We know that's in there. We know that there are people with traditional values that believe that men should work and become the head of household and who should run the family and protect and provide for the family. But the fact of the matter is that there is that healthy a percentage out there right now of people who not only identify as either not pro-feminist or non-feminist, but actually anti-feminist. And I'm going to be very interested in the years ahead that measures the growth of anti-feminism, because it is, I believe, obviously, at least we can see through anecdote, through places like this and other places on websites and what's happening in the mainstream media, we can see that anti-feminism is on the rise, and it needs to be. I don't particularly care much where it comes from, although I will stipulate that if anybody thinks that my form of anti-feminism is to move back to a time where I can mount a white stallion and go rescue the nearest damsel because she's pretty, not exactly on my agenda. But there is, I think, a lot to be said. Small populations are the ones that change world course in every time. It was not every African American in the United States that was on the streets facing water cannons from thug cops during the late 1960s. It was not the majority of women that moved things in a different direction for women in this culture. It was not the majority of gay men who started changing mentalities about sexuality and acceptance of sexuality in the culture at large. It was a small minority who were very vocal and organized and became very effective. And guess what you see happening now, folks? Feminism, I have a message for you too, not just for the dirtwad that Dr. T was talking to, but for all of you. We are approaching this, much as I'm not a big fan of Colin Powell, but we're approaching this in the same way that he announced when he did we were going to war with Iraq. Our strategy is simple. We're going to choke feminism off, and then we're going to kill it. That is the philosophy, that is the approach, and of course for all you POS quote miners out there that are going to be doing the Paul Elam pledges to kill all feminist headlines, go for it. I don't care. I was talking about the ideology, not the people that embrace it. But we're starting to see the beginnings of an emerging subculture and counterculture that is saying no more to feminism, and you might as well get used to it because it's going to do nothing but grow.
But don't worry, there are plenty of local DBT groups you can join.
What groups? What kind of groups?
Dialectical behavior therapy.
Okay. By the way, shout out to our friend Jessica Kenny, who is part of the Honey Badger Brigade, one of the sponsors of the International Conference on Men's Issues, because she was one of the women who started this. Go, Jessica. Speaking as a former feminist myself, as is Paul, I just said this in an interview with Angry Harry. I don't think feminism is the root issue, but by God, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Feminism is I'm going to say it again. Feminism is a multi-billion-dollar industry based on lies about domestic violence, sexual assault, and fathers. And any claim that it helps men too is an abusive lie. It does no such thing. It's like saying Jim Crow helped black people by giving them their own water fountains. No, thank you. No, thank you. And if feminists want to be part of the gender dialogue in the 21st century, they need to come to us, not the other way around. That's my position anyway.
And that is the AVFM position.
Yep, absolutely. So there you go. There was my angry rant. But in any case, I'm just enjoying watching the spinning because these people have no response to these women. These women who are obviously intelligent, obviously know how to read, obviously have done some homework, and they're mansplaining, femsplaining, condescendingly repeating the same tired, religious, dogmatic bullshit.
and apparently missing the irony that the way they are talking to the women in these images is one of the main reasons why they don't identify as feminists.
That's right. That's right. It's such incredible condescension.
And I have, by the way, through articles and on Twitter and in several other places, I have invited feminists that if you think that the women involved in the men's movement are obsequious and deferential to men and do what they're told and are just approval seeking, please do me a favor. Make contact with Senator Ann Cools or Erin Pitsey or Tara Palmatier or Karen Strong or Allison Tiemann or any of the others of these women that we have begun to associate with advocacy for men's issues, and start telling them what to do for a couple of minutes. Give them a couple of orders and boss them around. Send a man to do it so that you'll know what their reaction is to men pushing them around. And just please report back to us on what happens. Because
don't do it to judgy bitch Janet Bloomfield, because it has already been proven, because Steve Niebling, a skeevy little reporter in Detroit, actually said she can't be taken seriously because she used the word cunt. So don't approach her, because any woman who uses the word cunt is obviously...
What reporter did this?
Oh, Steve Niebling, the skeevy
Well,
little
some people can't understand normal thinking.
Right. Did he make the name up, Niebling?
You would think, just this sniveling little lying cocksucker. Oh, wait a minute, that I shouldn't have said cocksucker. I should have just said cum. Yeah, get over yourselves. Seriously, I don't even like the word cunt, but please, that's all you've got. Oh, somebody used a four-letter word you don't like, therefore they can't be taken seriously. Our ideological opponents are incoherent. It's like watching someone from Westboro Baptist Church clutching their Bible and reading passages to prove their point. Like it means something. I can just say patriarchy, and I can say rape culture, and I can make the phony claim that women have been marginalized for centuries, and no one's allowed to question that because I said so, because that's what my professors taught me.
Actually, when I read articles that are heavy with feminist terminology, I have the same reaction to when I'm reading professional psychology publications that heavily rely on psychobabble. It's like, if you can't explain your point to me in simple everyday language, then my guess is you're just engaging in verbal mental masturbation or some giant circle jerk, and it's bullshit. And I read this stuff, and I have to read the same paragraph 4 times over because it's word salad. It is absolute word salad.
Here's something I've said many times before, and I have conservative friends, and believe me, I don't.
That's why one of my the moment they ask me a question with the word intersectionality in it, I hang up. It's over.
Well, they robbed us of a perfectly good word, because that word could be used to mean something, but like multiculturalism,
sure, like
and even
in traffic class.
Yeah, intersectionality should be a study of where 2 different fields of study overlap, and where those 2 different fields of study might
or Fifth and Broadway, or
Fifth and Broadway, right? But they've stolen it, just like patriarchy describes a thing, and then they take that and they twist that into something that never existed and never has and never will. And
they use intersectionality just to say it.
Yeah,
because it's hip.
Yeah.
It's like it's like the old fairy tale, The Emperor's New Clothes. You say words like intersectionality, patriarchy theory, cisgendered sexism, and I don't know, throw in some of their other favorite words, and nobody knows what the F they're talking about, but nobody wants to admit it. So they let these conversations go on.
It's no different than 6-7 years ago tossing the word shizzle into a conversation. It's just fashionable.
Even the far leftist intellectual, whoever lived, Noam Chomsky, identified this as a bunch of buzzword bullshit that doesn't mean anything. And so that ought to give you, my conservative friends, I don't hate you. I really don't. We have some disagreements. My liberal friends, I don't hate you either. We have some disagreements. Even Noam Chomsky's not on your side on this shit. Maybe you ought to be reanalyzing where you're coming from.
How do you reanalyze something you have not analyzed to begin with?
Yeah, okay.
I first have to deem something worthy of my time before I engage in analysis.
Oh, fair enough.
I'm not going to analyze the text on a Bazooka Joe bubblegum wrapper. Not worth my time.
As soon as you start with patriarchy, intersectionality...
If you're using words like those words...
Analyze it. A bazooka is so plainly modeled in a phallocentric way that you don't need analysis. Just look at the picture. The guy's holding a dick. And at least it ejaculates enough that he probably won't get shot.
Well, and if he does, the Bazooka Joe gum is so hard that if he makes a vest out of them, he might be able to protect himself from the bullet.
I have read thousands of pages of feminist literature, and I have, just like Dr. Ellie Tams, who herself has a PhD in women's studies.
We have one story left.
Bollocks. It's all bollocks.
It's bollocks, and we have a story left. Speaking of bollocks.
Oh no! Well, we better hurry because I was about to say we need to close up.
I know we spent way too much time on Derek, whatever his name is. So my story. Sorry, I'm just going to take control here. Not seeking approval, am I, Derek?
I feel right.
So last week in Connecticut, a gentleman by the name of Carmine Cervellino was arrested because his wife called the police and alleged that he was carving a watermelon in a passive-aggressive manner, and she was perceiving it as a threat. Now, first of all, that's completely ridiculous. But what you should know is the Cervellinos are currently in the midst of a divorce case. The week before, she tried to get him arrested by claiming that he had marijuana in his toolbox, and when the police came to his home, he wasn't there, and neither was the toolbox. And when that failed, Mrs. Cervellino, a.k.a. Wile E. Coyote, went back to the drawing board and decided that slicing a watermelon is an act of domestic violence. And the police actually arrested this man.
For slicing a watermelon.
In a passive-aggressive manner. Yes.
While I am prepared to concede that you might look scary with a weird look on your face and be doing something like this to a watermelon, and that actually might be, I don't see how you can legally construe it as a threat, and I cannot imagine, somebody prove me wrong, a woman being arrested for that.
No. Well, I mean, this is just ridiculous. I mean, she wasn't successful the first time she tried to have him arrested, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was a frame-up job. So now she's manufacturing threats through fruit. And according to the article I read, the cops have turned the case over to the family division of the courts. I mean, this is just insane. This has now moved beyond the usual abuses of the Violence Against Women Act to the absurd.
It really is. It really is. So we really should be closing out, though, because we really are heading up on an hour. I just want to say to all the people at Bustle, at HuffPo, at Mick, or Mike, or whatever they're calling it, Daily Life, and Stuff, and Jezebel, who are all butthurt because an increasing number of women are challenging feminism openly or just rejecting it and wanting little to do with it. The men's human rights movement isn't anti-feminism because we're against equality. The men's human rights movement is for equality whether you want it or not. And the
men's human rights movement is against feminism because we're for equality.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right. And we're not going away. All right. Any closing thoughts, either of you guys?
I'm in the mood for some watermelon.
I have a great recipe for homemade watermelon margaritas. I'll email it to you afterwards.
Yeah, and I don't give a damn how anybody slices it. If it ends up on a plate, I'll eat it.
Oh heck, mine goes in the Vita what is it, Vitamaster?
Vitamix?
Yes, the Vitamix.
We'll see you all next Monday. Have a good one. Peace out.
Peace.
Peace, love, and equality. Peace, love, and equality.
And watermelons.
And watermelon.
And don't stab a watermelon. Stab feminism.